Have you ever wondered what stock returns you would get by following certain YouTubers that maybe recommend a stock or buy the stock themselves? You buy those exact same stocks, hold them for a long term. What type of returns would you get and they get during that time? Well, I asked that same question about 18 months ago. I selected about 7 YouTubers to follow over the last year and a half to see if I bought into those same stocks, how well would they do? And it was very enlightening and interesting overall because two of the investors did beat the market. And when I say the market, that's S&P 500. The other five did not. In fact, two of them did absolutely horrendous returns, well below 0%, while the S&P 500 was up 19% during that same time frame. So who are the 7 YouTubers that I've been following that I'm going to show you guys their stock picks and also the returns over the last 18 months? Well, those 7 YouTubers are Jeremy from Financial Education. I have Tom Nash, Chris Sain, Rod, the Popular Investor, Paul from Everything Money, Jimmy from Learn to Invest, and I also included myself as a 7th YouTuber overall. So I tried to pick YouTubers that were in different spaces, had different approaches from value investing to growth investing, and then frankly, some investors I can't even figure out what their strategy or approach is at all. So it's very, again, very interesting. And most of the YouTubers that I'm following, they have large channels. So I would consider myself a small YouTube channel under 20,000 subscribers. Most of these investors or YouTubers have hundreds of thousands of followers and subscribers. So I would think that a huge majority of YouTube and retail investors that are looking for specific advice on YouTube are following these specific people. So I think this is a pretty decent sample size if you were to follow, say, the broader YouTube market in general. How well would you do? So what were the ground rules for the stock picks for these certain YouTubers? So what I essentially did is, pick those 7 YouTubers, and then I went to their channel, and this is going back to 2022. So really the first 6 months of 2022, I looked at their most popular videos on their channel to see what stocks they were recommending or buying themselves and using those in this analysis. Now I capped each investor at 10 stock. So I watched some videos. I watched 20 different videos of one investor or YouTuber before I got 10 stocks. Some of these YouTubers don't have, maybe they only have 4 or 5 that I saw in their videos. But once I got to 10 stocks, I just capped it off from there. Now I will say, after looking back 18 months, there are a number of stocks that these YouTubers picked that the ticker symbol is just not available anymore. So after digging into it, there are different scenarios. So for example, the company may have gone bankrupt, the company may have been bought out or maybe merged with another company, or they may have just gone private altogether. So how I traded these particular returns is, if they went bankrupt, I just assumed 100% loss. You can make a conclusion or say, hey, they would have gotten out before that. That may be true, but from my personal standpoint, I'm trying to make these assumptions and being consistent across the board. So I'm saying if they were bought and held to today, you'd have 100% loss. So keep that in mind. Whereas if it was a merger, it was an acquisition, or the company went private, I'm just assuming a 0% return on investment. So essentially you get out at the same price that you bought into. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm trying to use consistency across the board here. So let's first talk about the 2 YouTube investors that actually beat the S&P 500 over the last 18 months. And then we'll talk about the 2 YouTubers that really had a rough time. We'll just put it that way, had negative 10% and negative 30% returns while the S&P 500 was up almost 19% during that time period. And then we'll talk about the other YouTube investors as well on there. We'll go through every single stock pick. So the first 2 I want to talk about that did the best, that actually beat the market, was Rob, the Popular Investor, and then also myself. And this video is not to brag. It's not to throw anybody under the bus or anything. I'm trying to stick to the facts in this video. And if you're curious, I will put a link to that original video back in July of 2022 if you want to go back and watch it and see that I have the same stock picks that I'm showing here as in that video. So I'll put a link up here you can click, or I'll put the link down below in the description and you go check that out. So you might be wondering, what were the stocks Rod the Popular Investor was investing in or was talking about, and what were the stocks that I would invest in and hold long term at that time. So let's get into those stocks right now. So on the screen right here, you can see my stock picks, J Money, and then you can also see Rob the Popular Investor. Now, I will say I'm disappointed that Rob is not on YouTube, or he doesn't have his old channel still up and running. And there's kind of reasons behind that. I think he was one of the few good YouTubers that were out there that kind of talked about stocks in general. But Rob, he talked about Overstock, so ticker symbol BYON. They actually had a different ticker symbol. So if you go back and watch my old video from July of 2022, you'll see it has a different ticker symbol. They actually changed it in the last year, so just keep that in mind. Crocs, Warner Brothers, and you can see kind of across the board. So he had a 22% gain over the last 18 months. Again, these particular stocks, he may not still own. Some of them he still does, but some of them he may not own. But these were ones that he was talking about during that time period. So again, he's up 22% based on these stocks. The big ones, and this particular one is Meta, 119% gain. Crocs was 74%. AMAT, I'm not sure if that's like Applied Materials maybe. I'm not sure. That one's up 72%. He certainly had some losers. Warner Brothers, negative 17%, GoPro, negative 34%, but still overall pretty good. My gain was about 48% during that time frame. My big winners on here were Carvana at 160%, Wix at 105%, Meta 119%. Some losers I had, Disney, negative 5%, and then also Tencent was at negative 10% overall. But we were the only two investors during that 18 months that actually beat the market. So now let's talk about two investors that did very poorly on suggesting stocks or buying stocks themselves to see how they did. All right, and those two investors or YouTubers are Jeremy from Financial Education and Chris Sain. Now, I will say, looking at some of these ticker symbols, for example, like Tattooed Chef by Jeremy, also Smile Direct Club, both those companies went bankrupt, so that's why you see negative 100% there. Now, as far as Chris Sain goes, he had three different stock picks from Home, GNUS, and then TRCH. Now, they did not go bankrupt. Either they went private or they merged with another company, so that's why they're showing 0%. So during the last 18 months, Jeremy did negative 31%. His worst ones in here is Oatly, negative 64%. Obviously, those two that went bankrupt, which we talked about. Planet 13, negative 50%. So certainly he had some pretty big losers during that time frame. Now, JP Morgan was a positive 50%, which is fantastic. But overall, definitely the stocks he was talking about and buying into did very poorly during that time period. And Chris Sain, he's down about 11% during that time frame. Now, keep in mind, he talks about stocks all the time. I mean, every day it seems like he's talking about a new stock. So you might make a statement that, he's just buying and selling out of stocks really quickly. He does more stock trading than investing, and I get all that. But if you're a retail investor and you don't know what you're doing, you may just be following his stock buys, buying, holding. You may not necessarily know when he's actually selling or not selling if you're not watching his videos every single day. And there's always a lag time with that as well. But certainly these were the worst two out of the 7 YouTubers that I followed over the last 18 months. So now let's talk about the other 3 YouTubers. They didn't beat the market by any means, but at least they didn't have any stocks that went bankrupt or had any major issues. Okay, so those 3 YouTubers are Tom Nash, Paula Everything Money, and then Jimmy from Learn to Invest. Out of the 3, Jimmy did the best at a positive 15% versus the S&P 500, which is up 19% during that same time frame. Now, the big winners for him and his stock picks were Meta at 118% positive. He also had Google at 25% positive, Apple at 29%, but he had some negative ones in there too, with Alibaba being down 24%, AT&T being down 18%, and then Warner Brothers being down 17% at that time. As far as Paul from Everything Money and Tom Nash, they did about the same. So Paul did about 7% and Tom did about 6%. So both of those are 12% below what the S&P 500 did during that specific time frame. Paul, some of his big winners were, Meta. He had Intel as well. Some of his big losers were Sleep Number, Alibaba, Walgreens. Tom Nash. Some of these I don't even know. I don't know what GENI is, but that was up 159%. NVTA was down 96%. Really, the only two here that I recognize is Tesla and Palantir. And Palantir was up 94%. But three of those picks were pretty bad, and they kind of drug down that overall percentage there. So just to summarize real quick, I was up 48% over the last 18 months. Jeremy was down 31%. Tom Nash is up 6%. Chris Sain is down about 11%. Rod, the popular investor, is up 22%. Paul from Everything Money up 7%. And Jimmy from Learn to Invest is up roughly 15%. So what are my conclusions after looking at the results from all 7 of these YouTubers? And frankly, if you learned anything from this video, I would say do not ever blindly follow any YouTuber, whatsoever. And again, I do understand that, some of these folks may not have these stocks anymore. Maybe they're more of like kind of a trader getting in out of them. But again, if you're a retail investor, you don't know how to invest, you don't have a strategy, you may be following some of these people, jumping in and then blindly following them and then losing a lot of money. And you have to be really, really careful in those situations. It's incredibly important to know your strategy, understand how to value companies, understanding what the intrinsic valuation of a company is. One great book that's out there is Rule 1 Investing by Phil Town. If you don't know how to invest, maybe you're doing really poorly with investing, I highly recommend that specific book. I think it gives a really good foundation overall on coming up with the strategy. If you don't know how to value companies, now I do offer on my Patreon how to value companies. I have different templates on there that you can use. I have a video that goes through each one of those templates and explains how you can use those templates on valuing businesses and where to pull that information from, whether it's free cash flow, earnings per share, operating income, all that good stuff there. So hopefully you got some value out of this video. Hopefully these kind of videos you enjoy. If you want me to do more, maybe there's more YouTubers that you want me to follow and start comparing them, throw those down in the comment section. I think it's just really interesting to, look back at, after 2 years or even longer to see where these are going to be, where the results are, are going to be based on, stock picks from many moons ago, to say the least. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to check out my original video in July, again, that's down below in the description. My Patreon is down there as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Catch you on the other side. Take care and God bless.